So they said 9 of the 13 had to ratify this Constitution. But thereafter, in Amendment 5, Article 5, whenever we're going to amend the Constitution, you got to have 3/4 of the 7 times. But so this is done. You don't have to worry about the ratification clause anymore. That was done. We did it. 9 of the 13 states. Actually, 13 of the 13 states ratified it, but not until it was agreed that we would have a Bill of Rights. And you'll see in this movie that we're going to watch next week that George Mason stood there at the very end, one of the, I would say, 5 or 6 main guys at the convention. And at the very end, he says, "I'd rather chop off my right hand than put it to the Constitution the way it stands." And George Washington said, "Why? You're one of the main guys." And he said, "Because it doesn't have a Bill of Rights, a Declaration of Rights like they had in all the 13 colonies." I want to emphasize this for several reasons, but one of it is this idea of a written Constitution. Madison said, "But we all understand. We don't need a Bill of Rights. We've got those in our states, and we've written the Constitution here so that the government will be restrained and won't abuse our rights." And he said, "That's right." He says, he said, "Future generations may not know what we consider our God-given unalienable rights. We need to make a list of them and say what the government can or cannot do." So that's what we did in the Bill of Rights. And we'll spend 1 week just on the Bill of Rights itself and those 25 or so. Okay, that's the, and then the amendments, the 27 amendments. So that's the Constitution. Introduction, 7 articles, 3 of which describe the national government, and then the Bill of Rights, which puts more limitations on the national government. So what I'd like to do, if you just get your Constitution here, and in the next few minutes, we'll go through and look at some of the highlights here. If there's something that you see in there that you say, "Hey, I've never seen that, that's where it is," then raise your hand and do it. But let's kind of skip through. Article 1 is the legislative branch. And so it says all legislative, that's lawmaking powers. All legislative powers that are granted in the Constitution here shall be vested in a Congress of the United States. So that's Article 1, right at the very beginning. They create a legislative branch, a lawmaking branch, the U.S. Congress, and it says shall consist of a House and a Senate. A House and a Senate. And then Section 2, they're going to now describe the House of Representatives. And then Section 3, they describe the Senate. Just for quickly glancing through, it says in Article 2, in Section 2, it says that the House is elected every 2 years. Is elected every 2 years. It says the Senate is elected every 6 years. And it says that to run for the House, you got to be 25 years old. And then Section 3 says to run for the Senate, you got to be 30 years old. And when we get to Article 2, this executive branch says to run for president, you got to be how old?
42.
35 years old. Who said 42? To run for the House, then the Senate, and the president. The only reason I do it is just so you can say, "Oh yeah, I've seen that's in the Constitution." The number of representatives will not exceed 1 every 30,000. Let's do this. In the U.S. House today, there's 435 members. And in the Senate, there's 2 for every state, so there's 100 senators. Does anyone know why we have 435 representatives? Who came up with that odd number?
They ran out of chairs?
Sort of. I mean, what they did was, at the very beginning here, they said, there'll be 1 representative for every 30,000 people. And I think it totaled up to like 65 people. And they said, to begin with then, we'll have, Massachusetts will have 8, they're a big one. Rhode Island and Providence Plantation will have 1, Connecticut 5, New York 6, New Jersey 6, Virginia 10, they were a big one. And it totaled up to like 65 or something like that, or 30, whatever it was. But then, as the population grew in the United States, they kept increasing this number from 60 or so, more and more and more, until I think it was 1911, they got up to 435, and they said, we got that, we can't get any more people into the deal. That's really, so we got to build a bigger building, or we just got to cap it at 435, and that's what they did, and said, we'll just now increase the number of, instead of 1 for every 30,000, we'll do it, we'll divide the population of the United States by 435, and so now you divide 310 million, or whatever we had in the last census, and you get something like 750,000 people, or 780,000 maybe, something like that.
Do you find it ironic that it was within a few years of when they also passed the Federal Reserve Act and started the trip towards debasing our currency? It seems to me ironic that in 1911 they quit.
There's a lot of
adding-
bad things happened in 1911 and 1913. I never thought of that. Never thought, okay. So, okay, the Senate, now, we'll come back sometimes as we're talking about things, but, and it talks about the Senate. And it says in the Senate, it says the Vice President of the United States is technically the President of the Senate. He never goes there, except to break tie votes, because he's the President of the Senate.
To be on TV.
It says the Senate shall have the right, oops, on the House, earlier, it says that the House shall have the sole power of impeachment. They can impeach, the House can impeach people here, or here, high people in government. But impeachment is just like an indictment, a charge, a criminal charge. It doesn't do anything. You gotta have a trial. So the House impeaches, but the Senate has sole power of trying impeachments. So Bill Clinton was those, so he was impeached on those. The Senate when it pretty much was voted on not convicted on any of those things.
Ron Paul pointed out that bombs in Libya, I think it was.
Violate the Constitution. We have not constitutionally declared Sharia was not done. Norm in 2000 are legal, constitutionally declared.
Executive orders?
Executive order. The president just does it. I'm just going to big deal after 9/11, and so go to war and we're good. And but he didn't have a constant votes in Congress 60 or 50 congressional declaration of war, and they didn't. We had an offensive war. South Korea, Vietnam, same thing, and with Kuwait, an offensive war, the one in 2000. Ron Paul said, look, if we're going to go to, he proposed a bill saying, House then infamously said, it's out of date, it's out of, let's allow it to be voted on. And there was a reason it would have supported, we'll spend some time on that.
Is that when we
certainly ought to.
I was Speaker of the House then?
Who was the Speaker? Henry Hyde.
Was it Henry Hyde?
The House, the Senate, congressional elections, at least once a year. That's where the congressional sessions, once a year, we have, Congress has a session. House and Senate, 6, conference session, 7. Okay. Money. And they're gonna spend money, it's got to be, to start off, the bill's got to start off in the House. That's probably not that important.
Well, it doesn't matter on Obamacare. Passed it.
No, they
Came out of the Senate.
maybe we'll get around to that. Well, we've gotten to a way where they basically use shell corporations, shell bills now, and every once in a while, it says that it's a. Let me read that. This is the second. That's by the House and the Senate shall before it be considered. If not, it's returned. Okay. So that's Section 8 is the huge one. Article 1, Section 8. Article 1, Section 8. It says.
The lawmaking.
Well, I put on there lawmaking authority of food, and then there's. They can do taxes, but indirect taxes. The United States regulate commerce with foreign state commerce clause and with the Indian clause about naturalization that we talked about. Because if you have a different bankruptcy laws, for example, right? So you got and to regulate the value of foreign coins. See there, and there's something that scientific experiments that use microwaves and establish post office science and useful arts. Hearing for limited times to authors of patent law, trademark, service marks. Is that a big deal? Why would they do that? So that inventors have happened here in the United States. We want more of them to happen, to have the incentive, like Thomas Edison, good things, if he doesn't have the incentive to do it. And we've got senators there, Orrin Hatch, from leads the battle to try to get rid of patent law. As children on this earth, if we have a nation, rather than making them wait 7 months, we've got to get rid of this. But we want to encourage, as it says there, in useful arts. We have patent law. There's the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court, but Article 1, inferior, not meaning, okay, let's see, to define America, and yet they're doing it. George W. Bush couldn't get and they didn't want to go back to obeying the Constitution anyway. The United Nations resolution supporting him in this. He finally got the U.S. Congress but just to resolution the feelings or the opinion of the House and or the Senate. Deal over in Iraq.